Welcome to the SaaS Revolution show. Amir Salihefendic, CEO and founder of Todoist. Welcome, Amir.
Thank you, Alex. It's a pleasure to be here.
Great to have you on the show. Been wanting to have you as a guest on the podcast for a while, and also as a speaker at one of our SaaStock conferences. Actually delighted to do both within the space of 2 weeks. And also this is the first time not only that we're speaking, but also the first time that I've ever had a guest on the show that's called in from Santiago in Chile. Perhaps as we ask, a little bit about, who you are as a person, we can get some insights as to what you're doing in Chile. But yeah, so let's roll into it and ask, who is Amir Salihefendic?
Sure, yeah. So I was born in a tiny town in Jajce, Bosnia. So it's kind of like a very beautiful town. There's like a huge waterfall in the middle of it. It kind of also a very old town. There's like a castle at the top of the town and like a Game of Thrones like a construction around it. Yeah, so that's where I was born. Like my family has lived there most of I don't know, many years, like probably over 500 years. And then like due to the Bosnian war in the 90s, we had to flee. We lost everything and we had to restart our life, and we restarted in Denmark. And I basically grew up like in Denmark. And then like maybe for the last, I don't know, over 10 years, I have basically lived around the world in different places, and like not only visited but actually lived there. And I live like in Taiwan, in Chile, in Portugal, in Spain. Yeah, and that's basically like I met my wife in Chile, like during the living and traveling in the outside, and basically yeah. So I split my time right now between like Barcelona in Spain and Santiago, Chile.
Very nice, very nice. I've done a bit in South America, but I've never been to Chile. I get the pronunciation right. We have some South American colleagues, and they always laugh at my pronunciation. And so, as we mentioned, you're the founder of Todoist. First of all, what does Todoist do? And tell us a little bit about why you founded the company, and some stats around the company as well.
Sure. So actually, like Todoist is like what we are best known for. It's like the product that we do, but the company itself, it's called Doist, and we are basically a remote first company. We have been at this for like over 10 years. We have 80 people spread around like many different countries, I think 30 countries. And we are kind of like an asynchronous remote first company. Yeah, and we also have another app called Twist, which is basically team communication, like mindful and asynchronous. And honestly, like we do have like Twist, and we want like that to be like the default asynchronous tool. But the reason why we are like so passionate about the asynchronous is more like that we think it's the best way to actually work together and live also. Yeah. And also just like some other stats, like, people for Todoist, which is a task manager, like people have completed like hundreds of millions of projects, billions of tasks. Our revenues are all like 10 million per year, American dollars. So yeah, so just like some random stats so people have like a picture of where we are at.
Yeah, very, very cool. And you bootstrapped?
Yeah, I mean, that's another thing, is like fully bootstrapped, no investors, no exit strategy. Like what I like to say is like that is my, exit strategy. So like there's no selling out, and like we want to do this for a long time. We also like really want to build like a very significant company in this space. I think like the opportunity here is like much bigger than most people realize. Yeah.
Do you think when you say significant, are you thinking about it in terms of revenue? Are you thinking about running 100 million ARR sort of business, or how are you thinking about significance?
I mean, honestly, the problem is like really money, is kind of the indicator of the value that you create. But what we really like are passionate about is kind of having like global impact, like changing, how people communicate, how people organize themselves. That is our passion. But, of course, like you need to kind of measure that somehow. And I think that money is that. But honestly, like, 100 million, I think, is like a very pessimistic goal. Like, if you think about that, you basically have like a market of like 1 billion plus people that that could benefit from this. And also, like, as the world like moves towards like digital work and knowledge work, I think it just becomes much, much bigger as we grow. Yeah. So yeah, we'll see. They said like 100 million in revenues like would be a nice milestone, but I think the potential is much higher than that. Yeah.
Okay, very, very cool. And you're, as you said, you're a remote company, 80 people, 30 plus countries. Remote first, since you founded the company. And why did you decide, as you said, I think 10 years you've been running the company, is that right? So you must be one of the first remote companies. So funnily enough, last week I was speaking to Joel from Buffer, who again was 10 years he's been running Buffer. And he said back then, there was like, he could count on 2 hands the amount of remote companies, right? So you were probably on one of his hands that he was counting. Why did you decide to go remote like so early? And what are your thoughts now, I guess, on remote? And the second part of the question, because I just saw a talk from you, I was watching a talk from you running remote, and you said in 5 to 10 years time, like remote will probably be the norm. What are your thoughts kind of like now? So why did you go remote so early, and what are your thoughts on remote now?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like I grew up on the internet and with the internet. For me, like this is kind of a natural thing, like working, across borders on your computer, communicating. I like when I started to do this. I actually like started to do this in 2007, where I co-founded a social network, which was based the 3 co-founders. Like I'm kind of like Bosnian, Danish. We also had like Indian, Canadian, and then Malaysian, Chinese, and we basically worked together and built like this like really freakish social network called Plurk, which is actually still alive today, and is like a very weird place, maybe due to like this cultural clash of like different people coming together and building this. So for me, that was just like very natural. I also like spend a lot of time gaming as a like teenager. So also like like having clans and like having people like just remotely working together and like fighting. That is kind of like the history. And when I actually started this, I lived in Santiago, Chile. And I couldn't like really find the talent I needed. So I just went and done the natural thing, which is basically hire from anywhere I can find like a great people. And at that time, like there was like nothing, I think, out like, like remote work as a revolution and like books and like big companies adopting this. So yeah, so that's basically history. And regarding like the future, like I had like an article written like why the future of work is remote. And honestly, like we are just seeing like the natural acceleration of the future right now due to the pandemic. And it's maybe like going a few years into the future. And I think like this will be like much, much bigger than most people realize. So from my perspective, this is basically like as big as like industrialization period, because it's kind of like the first time in human history where you can have like a great job regardless of where you live. And the implications of that are like very, very significant if you think about like just like play out the effects, like second order and third order effects of this. Yeah. So, and like there's all kind of like positive things, there are some negative things about this. But of course, like, we are mostly thinking that this would be a very, very positive thing for the world. Also, just like for these rural places of the world that are kind of left behind and where you don't really have opportunity to get a great job. And also just like for family life as well, like, you can maybe now move to like a lower cost where you have like a big house, you have nature, you maybe also have a community or your family. So yeah, I think we will have like a lot of positive effects of this. So we are quite excited. Yeah.
Good, good. And it's good to talk about the positive side of things of, what's happening, despite obviously the obvious sort of negative sides of, the pandemic that's been. And we like many companies, have been forced to work remotely, certainly for the short term. And many are now, announcing that they will be remote forever, like Twitter and so on. We've announced today we'll be remote for the foreseeable, potentially forever, but we'll see. But so for us as a company, and many businesses have had to adapt, their business and the way they operate in some ways because of the pandemic. How has it affected Doist? Have you had to change anything within the business? Just interested to learn a little bit about this.
Yeah, I mean, something to know is like we are experts at remote work. All our processes are already optimized for this. We are asynchronous by default and stuff like that. But like working, during a pandemic, it's kind of very different from like working normally. And like psychologically it's very different, like for instance for me, I'm stuck at home for like almost 2 months with a baby and a toddler, where we like need to do like all the stuff that we usually like sometimes have help for, like for instance cleaning or like daycare. So and then you also have like just like right now the growth of the virus kind of exponential in Chile, so there's a lot of like problems with that, just like you don't really know what will happen. We also have the riots. So like it's remote work in like the extreme version, and I think like if people can actually make this work in this environment, like remote is much better when you actually are not in the pandemic, because you basically have like freedom. You can go to a coffee shop, you can spend more time with your kids, and like people have a lot of freedom and flexibility, and right now I don't really think we are taking advantage of that. So like in the company, I think like productivity wise, I don't think it has affected us, but like mentally, I think there's a huge drain on people, and we need to recognize that.
What are you doing anything in particular around that, to thinking about and actually, so I'm a member of this entrepreneurs organization, and one of my sort of groups sent this sort of message today, just sort of thinking about just the mental sort of health and well-being, that generally he's a person that everything is fine, doesn't really think about mental health and well-being, and you just get on with it, is his sort of mentality. But having been confined in a kind of small space, without that ability to meet other people and so on, it takes its toll. So as an employer, to 80 people, what have you done, if anything, to kind of, recognize this, or is this something that you're just thinking about at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like I think something that like leaders and companies need to do is kind of like lower the expectations, and don't like pressure people in this kind of environment. So we have, for instance, like extended, like we usually work in like 1 month cycles. We have extended them by a bit, and we also accept that like maybe we're not going to hit all of our deadlines, and stuff like that. So I think that's something you can do. And honestly, I think also like we're probably going to get into this, but like the current work environment that most people are greeted with in this remote is kind of like chat rooms and Zoom calls all day long. And I think this is also like a huge fatigue for people, especially like if you have kids. Like for me, actually, like I have tried to just like do as few meetings as possible, because I just don't have time to block like 5 hours per day in calls. So I think also like the culture that most companies promote and do is really like not very healthy in this kind of environment. So that would be like my 2 tips, is kind of like lower the expectations, accept like more missed deadlines and stuff like that, and then also like combine it with like less meetings and less like synchronous like work. And also like some other stuff, like we have actually increased the amounts of like hangouts we do, so just like casual hangouts we do, so people can just like chat. and like meet other people and talk with other people. So that's also something you could do like for you folks. Yeah.
You know, so I'm super keen, as I'm sure the audience are, to learn, you know, more about asynchronous, you know, communication and culture, and also, as you say, and I think I've heard you speak about it before, just about the fact that often, and I remember maybe it was at Running Remote, you showed, you shared your calendar, right, and say this is what my calendar kind of looks like, right? And if you compared it to my calendar, which was like nothing but meetings, right? I was like, wow, I was very curious to see how you can operate, you know, a business, and, you know, business that's doing 10 million a year, 80 people across the globe, without, you know, all of these meetings. And I know we run different businesses and everybody does. But I'm super curious to kind of learn about that, because you mentioned meeting fatigue is real, Zoom fatigue is real, right? And combining the both, you get even more tired. So let's talk about asynchronous, I guess, kind of first, because I never heard this term, or didn't really, you know, wasn't aware of it before a couple of months ago, and before the kind of shift to remote. So what is asynchronous communication, and then how do you guys implement it? How does it look like at Doist?
Yeah, I mean, I think like the best way to understand it, and this is actually a term I think that Matt from Automatic uses, and Automatic's kind of over 1,000 people all working like in asynchronous, like remote first environment. And something to think about, it's kind of like a spectrum, and you have like different levels. So you start like level 1 is basically office work, like everybody's just in the same place. Level 2 is kind of like maybe you work some of the days outside. I'm not sure how he defines it, like level 2 and 3, but it's basically like a partial thing where you basically have like, it's mostly office work, but just like in a remote setting. And then I think like it becomes really interesting when you move into like this, I think he coins it like level 4, which is basically asynchronous by default, which we kind of like naturally, like I've never heard about this before. Like we have just basically naturally adopted this because it's kind of the natural consequence and evolution of how you actually go into this. Because when we started out, we actually also started out using Slack and a lot of meetings. And then suddenly you find out like you actually want to hire people from different time zones, but you actually don't really want to work like all times of the day and have meetings, you know, at like 1 a.m. and 2 a.m. or like, you know, at 5 a.m. in the morning. And then you also figure out like, you know, being stuck in chat rooms as well. And for instance, like if there's a conversation going on and you're not part of it, when you maybe wake up, you know, like decision will be made, or like maybe there will be 2 other conversations started in the same chat room. And then like basically, you know, you need to be connected all the time. And this like really, especially as a leader, I think this is very, very problematic. And then you've kind of tried to think about what is actually like the solution here. You know, is it like to hire people just from one time zone, but then you kind of like limit yourself, you know, and some remote teams do this, where they basically like hire from a few time zones and then they have synchronized time. But for us, you know, like we have already like hired great people from all around the world. And even like if you just hire, you know, really great people from Europe and like Eastern coast of US, you will have a problem with time zones. Yeah, and then like asynchronous, kind of the natural thing is like you need to move more communication where you don't need to have a response right away, and you also like need to like make the communication much deeper and more thoughtful. So for instance, like when I deliver a message to somebody or like a comment, it needs to include like all the information. Like it can be like one liner, like hello, are you there, and then like I blab about the problem. I kind of like need to compose, you know, the message, and then when I do that, I don't need to expect the answer right away. And when the person responds, like they actually need to also respond back with like you know, a lot of like knowledge, or like a payload needs to be high in their response. So I think it's basically that is like you need to shift more of the communication to be like asynchronous. So like it's not real time. You don't need answers in real time, and you can basically wait. And for us, like we have a rule that people need to respond in a matter of 24 hours. Yeah. And of course, like also something you learn, like when we actually started this journey, like we started in saying, okay, like meetings are very bad, all synchronous communication is very bad, and then we just went 100% into asynchronous, and you quickly find out, like, you know, that is not really a good solution either. So what we basically find out is like you need to find a sweet spot. Basically, like asynchronous default, like maybe 60-70%. Then you need to layer in like meetings. You also need to have like channels where you can actually contact people, especially like in development. Like, you know, if somebody has like pushed something and broken everything, you know, like you need to have a phone number you can call to. And what you find out is like we do have like these synchronous channels, but we use them like only when it's like strictly needed, and then everything else is asynchronous. Yeah. So I hope I gave like a good overview of this.
Do you just thinking about, so again, I'll draw from our experience, and using Slack, as you say, the like great tool, but it can create, you know, a lot of like bad habits and even productivity issues, even though it's a productivity tool, I guess. And what we found in our team, even though like when we were, you know, in the office, people would communicate via Slack, even though if your colleague is, you know, behind you. And then often there was this kind of pressure that if somebody Slacks you, you have to respond immediately. And then if you don't, you know, people were kind of getting a bit tense about why haven't they responded, and so on. So as we've now sort of moved remote, some of this bad behavior, you know, has come across. But some of the people that are kind of used to, you know, immediate responses, or just kind of this overwhelm by Slack, have now adopted this, you know, asynchronous communication, I think, and then feeling the benefits. So for us as an organization, maybe it's a leadership thing, or I'm not sure, but we haven't said to everybody in the company, you should be asynchronous and this is the way that you work. But some people are adopting it by themselves kind of slowly. And I wonder if you've seen that, and if there is a right or wrong way around that. You know, should we let it grow organically, or, you know, should I be saying to people, hey, you know, have you heard of asynchronous communications? Maybe this is a better way of working. Have you any opinions around that? Any advice even?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think like the tools that you use inside an organization shapes the culture that you have. And I think there's like there's probably a law. I'm unsure which law it is, but basically, like, you know, the tools that the organization builds is kind of reflected of like the culture and organization they have. So I think that's something to think about. Is, you know, of course, like I think you can make like Slack work in an asynchronous, like more asynchronous manner, but really the whole experience is optimized towards like real-time chat, and a lot of like the patterns that I use there are kind of optimized for that pattern. Yeah, you know, I think you kind of make it work, but it's not really like the pure and the best experience that you have. And I think also something to note is once you move to kind of like more asynchronous culture, like documentation and written language becomes like much more critical. So for instance, like a lot of like also us, like, you know, our handbook, like we actually started our handbook very late, I think like some months ago. But already right now, like it has, I think, 2,000 commits from like many different people. So basically, like, people are just like jumping in and embracing this. And if you also like look at some other cultures like GitLab, you know, they have like their handbook online that has like 4,000 pages, like documents everything, and it's basically like documentation first culture. And I think like this is also really, really critical, like having the knowledge base and also like decisions like being documented, the processes being documented. Like this is also really a big part of actually moving into like a more asynchronous space. Yeah, and I think also like for another thing, I think there's also a side effect, and maybe also just like natural progression towards this is kind of transparency. So most of these like organizations that have adopted like this are very, very transparent, and like even like in Doist, like the only thing that is not public are kind of salaries. Everything else, including like leadership discussion, product discussions, everything is just like public. Everybody can see them. Everybody can see how decisions are made. And I think this is also really, really important. And also just like a side effect, because you can't really see people face to face in office environment. So you actually need to like share knowledge in a different way. And I think like documentation and like written form is the way to go. Yeah.
Just on this transparency then, so everybody can see everything, like decisions that the top management are making and right through the company. What tools are you using? Where is all this communication and all this transparency sitting? Yeah, we'll be keen to learn about that.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like, so for us, like we use Twist, of course, like our own tool as like the baseline, where we basically have like channels and like threads, and like most of these channels, like I think maybe 99% are public by default. And everybody can join them or preview them and see the discussions inside them. So that's one tool that we use. And then we also have like I mean, I don't actually think tools are that important. It's more like, having a knowledge base. So maybe like you could use Notion, or you could use like Dropbox Paper, or you could use Google Drive or even Word, to kind of like really have like a knowledge base that you kind of build collaborative with other people. I think that's the powerful thing. Yeah.
And to talk to us a little bit about your empty diary, and maybe I'm exaggerating it a little bit, but what I saw, I know you're a fan of deep work, or I believe you're a fan of deep work, and yeah, you don't do that many meetings, right? So talk to us about that, why you would not do so many meetings, how that helps. Again, if we're looking at, and I don't know about our listeners, but for me, I've only just moved to a model whereby in the mornings, I try not to take meetings, and that's my deep work time. But it's kind of interrupted a little bit by, we've got our daily huddles, and then there's a bit of, conversation that kind of, continues from that. So I might get an hour and a half of uninterrupted work if I'm lucky. And then in the afternoon, it's just nothing but meetings right through to the end of the day. And then I'm exhausted, which I'm hoping will change at some point. So I'm really keen to learn about how you do it and how that works, and when you implemented sort of this sort of method.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think this is kind of, again, like a natural evolution. So once you actually become asynchronous by default and you move a lot of like communication, documentation, decision making into like a more written form, then you don't actually need to make a lot of meetings, and you also find them that like a lot of meetings are not really super productive. So for instance, for us, like we don't actually do like meetings, like daily stand-ups, because like first, it's really expensive. It's also really inconvenient. Like if you have people spread around the world in time zones, to just like have them synchronize like a time where they can be present. And a lot of times it's just easier to maybe just write a message and tell people like what are you going to work on. And you can also like automate that as well. So we have like automations that can basically ask like team members, what are you going to work on? Yeah, so I don't think actually this is like it's just like a natural progression that you will actually reduce the amounts of meetings if you actually go asynchronous first. Of course, I think like some meetings are very important. Like I still do some meetings, like a leadership meeting, or like one-on-ones where you need to have like a building rapport with people, or you have like a very urgent issue, or you want to provide like some good feedback to people. Yeah. But I think like there's too much like reliance on like meetings in today's culture, and I think like if people are just like more mindful, it will be kind of and move like more towards like asynchronous communication. Like I think you will eliminate meetings by like a side effect.
How many meetings do you on average do you have a day or a week?
I mean, internally, it's only a few. I have like a product meeting, like a CXO meeting with my leadership team, and then I have some like maybe a few one-on-ones. So that's about it. And then I do have like some external meetings with like external leaders or podcasts or whatever, interviews that I do. Yeah, so maybe like 10 in total or something like that. Yeah.
Okay. Very cool. And a couple more questions. So, as you mentioned, obviously, pretty much the whole world is working remotely right now, and most of them for the first time. Do you have any kind of like top tips for those that are just, adopting remote work? Obviously, we've covered, asynchronous communication, but anything else like around that people should be thinking about as we're either in this temporary remote position, or even again many of us thinking about it for the much longer term? What are your kind of tips as being a 10-year sort of vet?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like something that we have done, like for us, it's kind of more like a religion than actually like a business concept. So we have actually blogged and written about this for the last like 10 years. So we have like Doist blog where we have like our best like ideas posted. And then we have also actually written something called Twist Remote Guides with other companies where we basically taken everything we have learned, doing this for 10 years and basically documented everything. And it's like really, really really deep and goes like onto many different topics. For instance, like hiring, like if you actually want to hire people remote, if you want to onboard them, how to communicate, how to do project management, how to do design, how to do engineering, and I think we have probably also written about marketing and finance. I don't know. Like, I mean, everything you can actually think about, like we've probably blogged about it. And I know like some other companies have as well. So GitLab, for instance, it's like 1,000+ people company. They have like a handbook where they basically document everything. I mean, some of it is kind of like, it's kind of very different cultures from ours. So they do a lot more meetings and actually but they have also much more transparency as well. So basically for them, like you can actually go in and see how they are structured, how they communicate internally, and you can even like see the schedule of the CEO and like I mean, it's kind of insanity. And then you also have like Buffer and Basecamp as well, who has also done like an amazing job just like documenting and inspiring people. So honestly, I think there's like a lot of great resources on how to get started with this and how to adopt this. And honestly, like for us, like a lot of people are forced into this, but we think it's kind of like the future of work. It's where everybody's going. And if you become good at this, there's like a lot of stuff that is unlocked, like freedom and hiring like amazing people from anywhere. And there's like all kind of side effects based on this. So like we're very, very, very excited about this. So yeah, we'll see where this will go.
Good stuff. You're, as we mentioned at the beginning, you're speaking at the upcoming SaaStock remote conference on June the 10th and 11th. Do you know, as of yet, it's a couple of weeks away, what you'll be speaking about?
Honestly, like I would really like to speak about like remote work, asynchronous communication, culture, and like why this is actually like the future of work. So that's kind of like the stuff that I'm very passionate about, and I think really like we can improve the world by going this way. So that is my hope. Yeah.
Cool, good stuff. Well, looking forward to that. And we always ask our guests how they stay healthy and sane as leaders within their businesses. Again, especially important during these times. What is your way?
Yeah, honestly, like I think it's really, really tough in this environment. I do try to kind of like sneak in some exercise and some meditation, but like my usual routines are much more healthy. I usually like play football with friends, and I usually go to the gym and do some swimming. It's kind of like but I think it's very important, especially like we have been in this for like a long time now, and you need to stay healthy. You need to eat healthy. And also just like spending time with your kids and your wife. That is also great. So, but honestly, like I would lie like if I said like, yeah, I have found like the perfect routine, like it's really easy. Like I think this is really tough, and I hope this ends soon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, definitely. No, I agree with you. But look, for me, the exercise I've actually found, or I don't know if it's just the current sort of mindset, but before I was going to the gym on a regular basis, and that was where I was doing my exercise. Now I'm working out from home, and I'm using apps, and for yoga and for high intensity stuff like that. And I think I actually might not go back to the gym like after this. So sort of remote workouts, not remote working, but remote workouts. So that might be the future as well for me. But yeah, very interesting. But look, Amir, I know I've kept you a little bit over time. I've really enjoyed speaking with you, learning from you for our own benefit, but also for our audience and our community. Really looking forward to your talk at SaaStock Remote. Yeah, it's been a real pleasure. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Alex, for having me here. I'm really looking forward to see how this all pans out. And, for you guys, I think it's also very exciting times, maybe also frightening, like you need to change everything like in a matter of like months, but, yeah, it's kind of acceleration of all stuff. So we'll see where this goes.
Definitely exciting times. Thank you very much.